I don't know about you, but that's woken me up. Lovely to meet you all and welcome to this webinar. Over the years, we have had many conversations and spoken to many people about Belbin. It's been at conferences, exhibitions, meetings, at the school gates even. And sometimes the conversation has gone a little bit like this. It's going, I know Belbin, brilliant. Insert team role here. I'm a plant. And I reply going, well, that's really interesting. Tell me more about it. How have you used your plant behaviour? Have you worked on it? How much have you changed over the years? What other roles can you play? What does your team look like? Where are the deficits? Where are the overlaps? How have you grown? And very often we get a look back, which basically says, I really wished I hadn't engaged with you. Because people find it difficult, because they don't know the answers to those questions either. This also happens when we talk to people about training courses. They've worked with their teams, they've been with their teams, and they say, we've had a team development day, we've had a team workshop. And we say, excellent. What's come from that? What were the key learning points from your team? How are you going to embrace things and move forward? How will you know when your team has stopped learning? Trick question, obviously it never does. And again, people aren't so ready with their answers to that. So this is really where this webinar has come from. We realised actually that some people are quite fixed in the way that they see how Belbin or another tool has been done or their team development. Some people less so. Some people do engage. Some people do have a full conversation. So this led us really into looking at the concept of a growth mindset. And this is why we are here today. So today we are here for the next 40 minutes or so to talk about how to foster a growth mindset, how to be able to answer those questions. That would be wonderful, to have more interesting conversations, because Belbin, it's just a starting point, isn't it? All of these interventions are just a starting point. So my name is Jo Keeler, and I am the Managing Director at Belbin. What do we do at Belbin? Well, we deal with teams day in, day out, and by default, we deal with individuals day in, day out. What do? We help them to understand the contribution that they can make to the team and how to make it the most effective contribution possible. By everybody understanding their roles means that the team will be more successful. Before we start, a little bit of housekeeping. So please do write down your questions. We have Tracy, our new marketing manager, manning the chat. She's already introduced her there. Please do write them down. We will try to get to them. If we don't get to them, well, don't worry, this is being recorded. So it means that we can look at your questions and get back to you separately if need be. If you want to continue the conversation, what you can do is contact the Belbin team directly, or there will be an opportunity for you to get your cameras on with your questions and join us next week for a live Q&A. There will be more details of that as we go through. Okay, let me just check I've got everything there. For those that you know me, I'm a really low implementer, which means I'm not very good at organising everything. So let's have a check here. Make sure that you put all your questions and everything down in the chat. Tracy will be there. Yes, it's recorded. And if this is whetting your appetite, please do contact us afterwards or join in. Okay, where should we start? Let's start at the concept of a growth mindset. Okay. Can everybody hear me okay, by the way? Is that okay? Everything fine? Brilliant. Okay, let's start. Right, a growth mindset is a belief that you can develop your skills and talents through hard work, the right strategies, and guidance from others. Let's just spend a little bit of time here, because one thing I have noticed is some people are more au fait with the whole concept of a growth mindset than others. So who do we have here in the picture there is Professor Carol Dweck, and she is a psychologist at Stanford University in the States. And she started looking and researching into education very early on. And she looked at the differences between how children learn. And she noticed that some children learned very much of a fix. They just thought that was it. They've been told that they are intelligent, therefore they were intelligent, and they were brilliant at maths, and therefore they were brilliant at maths, and there was nothing they could do about it. Whereas other children actually were told, well, it is hard, but if you grow and you learn and you work hard, you might be better at maths, actually. You might be able to do that. And she noticed that there was a real difference in mindset. She then looked at this research and has actually made it and looked at it from an organisational point of view as well. Why is this important? Why is mindset important? Well, the view you adopt for yourself, and I'm reading this because it's really important that we get this right. The view you adopt for yourself profoundly affects the way that you lead your life. So whether or not you feel that you are in a fixed mindset or a growth mindset, this will directly affect the way that you lead your life. Let's all listen, yeah? Let's all start taking notes. It is being recorded. Now, I have this book here. This is one of Carol's books, all on mindset. And what I would love to do is actually just sit for the next 40 minutes and read it to you, because it is fascinating. You'll find, like me, your highlighter pen comes out and you start making all of these connections. There's so many stories about the benefits of a growth and not the benefits of a fixed mindset here. So please do take a look at this book. I will read some of it to you though, because just to get that real concept of the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset. Okay, so believing that your qualities are carved in stone, the fixed mindset, creates an urgency to prove yourself over and over. If you have only a certain amount of intelligence, a certain personality, and a certain moral character, well, then you'd better prove that you have a healthy dose of them. It simply wouldn't do to look or feel deficient in these most basic characteristics. She's saying that a fixed mindset, people believe, is innate. You're born with it. There's nothing you can do to improve on it. But there is another mindset, which these traits are not simply a hand you're dealt with and have to live with, always trying to convince yourself and others that you have a royal flush when you're secretly worried it's a pair of tens. I love that. In this mindset, the hand you're dealt is just the starting point for development. This growth mindset is based on the belief that your basic qualities are things you can cultivate through your efforts, your strategies, and help from others. For those of you who know Belbin well, perhaps you've been accredited, perhaps you've been on some other webinars, you'll understand how much we love that concept of having cards in your hands. And it's not about what card you've been dealt, it's how you play them. And this is really what we're talking about with a growth mindset. She goes on to say that you can see how the belief that cherished qualities can be developed creates a passion for learning. So knowing that we're not the finished article, knowing that there's so much to us, gives us this mindset of growth, a passion for learning. And the passion for stretching yourself and sticking to it, even or especially when it's not going well, is the hallmark of a growth mindset. It's difficult sometimes, isn't it, when things don't go well? You think, I won't bother. I won't put myself in that situation. That's a fixed mindset. What we're looking for, people say, no, this is hard, this has all gone horribly wrong, but what can I do to grow? What can we do to improve that? So a little bit of theory there from Carol. I would recommend the book to get far more of an insight into it. So those with a growth mindset will achieve more. They'll be less worried about looking smart and put more energy into learning. So important. Is it important? What does it matter to an organisational point of view? What does it matter that we have a growth mindset, that we're looking at growth and development as individuals? Well, if I just go to the next slide here. Okay, let's have a look. Oh, too busy clicking. There we go. Employees in a growth mindset are. Let's explain this a little bit more. So Carol Dweck and her team carried out some research. And what they did is they looked at quite a few sort of disparate organisations within the Fortune 500 or 1,000. So it's based in the States. They had lots of questionnaires and they asked, again, a wide-ranging amount of employees within each of those companies, lots of questions. And what they were doing really was to work out whether or not there were particular companies who were growth mindset or fixed mindset. And they found that actually there was a really, really clear distinction. It wasn't a muddling, there wasn't a bit of this or a bit of that. There was a real distinction between a fixed mindset organisation and a growth mindset organisation. And they used some wonderful words here to describe them. They said that those fixed mindset organisations had a culture of genius. Be recruited, but it was that culture of genius, that they got the best of the best. The people with the highest degrees from the highest universities already had this innate talent. They're the people that they wanted. They then found those organisations with a growth mindset. They called it the culture of development, in knowing that employees can grow and they can develop. They had the potential. They weren't the most talented, but they were ones who showed that perhaps that they had the potential to have it, to grow, to develop. And they looked at these two types of organisations, then they looked at the other questionnaires that the employees were asked to complete. And they found that an organisation that had a growth mindset, that 47% are likely to say that their colleagues were trustworthy. But if you think about it, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because if we're in a fixed mindset and we're constantly trying to defend what it is that we know to prove that we are a star, we're one of these stars and pieces of talent, you're less likely to share with others. Because if you don't think anything can change, then why would you share? So again, you've got that more likely to be trustworthy. These companies were 34% likelier to feel a strong sense of ownership and commitment to a company. And we must have all seen that. We must have all seen that when an organisation is invested in you as an individual to grow and change, develop, you've got, there's more of a relationship going, isn't there? You feel that they believe in you, so you're going to believe in them. 65% likelier to say that the company supports risk-taking. And I would like to say at this point, reasonable risk-taking is actually the key here. Because you need to take risks, don't you, for things to change. You need to take risks if you're developing people. More likely to do it if you have that concept that we haven't got it all right, actually, and we're going to go towards that. Also, 49% likelier to say that the company fosters innovation. And we know how important innovation is. We know how important it is to keep coming up with ideas and to keep changing things, to become competitive, to be competitive in this very, very competitive market. So we know that this is important. We know that actually a growth mindset is more than just us, it's a bigger picture. It's whether or not your organisation, and I love this, has a culture of genius or a culture of development. Now, before we go on to these 5 ways to help you foster a growth mindset, I just want to go through some common misconceptions, because I think these are really useful. And I know that one of them I fell foul to, actually, so I think it's worth sharing with you. Okay. So, some common misconceptions. The first one, I've always had a growth mindset. It's just the way I am. It's my natural state. This is important just to check that you're not just thinking about a positive mindset. You're not just talking about being open-minded and flexible. This isn't necessarily what we're talking about when it comes to a growth mindset. And Carol's quite strict, because this is what I thought, I'm a positive person. Surely I'm always thinking about growing and developing. Well, no, I'm a positive person. What Carol says is actually we are constantly changing between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. It's something that keeps going on. It keeps developing as we get older. We're not either one or the other all of the time. It doesn't exist. And we need to acknowledge this, because if we think we're always in a growth mindset, we might be missing the trick here. So it's really important. You haven't always had one. You may have always been positive. But actually, a growth mindset is different. We're a mixture of both. All you need for a growth mindset is an appreciation and rewards for putting in the work. It's not just about hard work. I mean, hard work obviously has got a lot to do with it, but a growth mindset is also about the journey. It's about learning, and it's about rewarding the effort, but also the outcomes. We need to make sure that there is this growth for a reason. There needs to be a strategy involved, and there needs to be an outcome. And outcomes matter. You need to have you really do need to work that out. Otherwise, you're just going to be praising hard work, which isn't leading to anything. And last, if you adopt a growth mindset, the rest will follow effortlessly. This was more levelled at the organisations. Having a mission statement using the words growth, innovation, people, development, all sounds great, doesn't it? But it's meaningless unless the strategy is in place. It's meaningless unless the values really do align. Organisations need to be committed to every single employee to make them the best they possibly can be, to keep on that constant growing and learning journey. Planning for the future. I've just written down here, so I keep glancing down because there's so much I want to say, but I've got such a limited time, is organisations need to reinforce the growth mindset with concrete policy. This is what needs to happen. Otherwise, sometimes there's just no point, is there? This isn't just a nice poster or a nice bit of, you know, something written in the foyer of your organisations. This is something that really needs to be ingrained. Okay, so fixed mindset, growth mindset. We've looked at the reasons why it's important and also some common misconceptions. What we need to look at now is actually some ideas, some strategies to help you, to help the people that you work with and those in your team to be able to foster a growth mindset. And as always with these things, as always, it's all about you. It starts with you. And first of all, what we need to do is push our boundaries. What does this mean? Well, I've never wanted to go on X Factor, but what they do talk about these things is that you're on a journey, don't they? They always talk about things being a journey. And that's where we kind of need to start. And this is what we hear a lot sometimes with Belbin. People say, I am a. Well, first of all, that's a shame people say that, because that's not what Belbin, it's not what any of these tools are about, as far as I'm aware. It's not about labelling. Unfortunately, people would have come across Belbin perhaps in a, well, and not a great way. Perhaps people haven't been accredited, perhaps you haven't used the correct reports, perhaps just used something you found off the internet or at the paper and pen thing they found at the back of somebody's filing cabinet. Unfortunately, this means that people sometimes have a not great experience of Belbin. But what we need to say is, right, this is you now. What else are you? What other strengths do you have? And where do you want to be? So it's about understanding that this is you right this very second, but this is not going to be you in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years' time, at the end of your career and beyond. We constantly change and develop. So what we really want to understand is that journey. Let's push ourselves. Let's understand that. Let's get on that train, or whatever metaphor you want to use, and start learning more about ourselves and learning how we can use that information. It's not just about finding out where our strengths are and going, brilliant, I'm a really, really strong plant. It's about how can I be the best plant I possibly can. So it's not just about saying I have strengths here. It's about strengthening those strengths and taking the responsibility for that, taking the responsibility to be able to become what we call a strong example of type. So I'd really like just to take you through quickly a Belbin report here. So if you wouldn't mind just changing my slides, that would be amazing. Thank you so much. You can download these slides from our website, actually. These are just our sample reports. I just want to give you a flavour. We're not going to go into too much detail because this isn't what this webinar is about, but I just want to give you a flavour for that. So here we go. This is Ali Blue. You can't see it particularly great because it's quite small, isn't it? But the whole idea is it's giving Ali an idea of how they see themselves by completing the self-perception inventory. And we use percentiles there. We use percentiles because when you complete the Belbin questionnaire, there's lots of algorithms and stuff going on in the background. There's new algorithms as well. We're on our 8th version. And we give you a percentile because we compare your score with a norms database. And we've just changed our norms database, and it's now 190,000 international people that you are being compared against. So as you can see here from Ali, Ali's completed the self-perception inventory, and they see themselves as a strong implementer, a strong completer, finisher, but they're only in like that 70th percentile there. They also have some manageable roles there, and then they have some least preferred roles. So using the growth mindset, there's a couple of things that we can do here. One, how can Ali strengthen their implementer or completer finisher? How can they get into the, well, they're in the 70th percentile, that means 30% of the population is higher, scoring higher than them for that particular role. What can they do to develop themselves to be even better? Now, I appreciate that not everybody's heard of Belbin. We had over 1,000 people sign up for this webinar. There's a likelihood there's people who haven't heard of Belbin, and welcome, it's lovely to see you. What do we mean by implementer behaviour? Well, implementer behaviour, they're very loyal, they're very hardworking, they roll up their sleeves and they do the work that needs to be done for the good of the company. They're very organised, they're very process orientated, they're very practical. They're the ones with a slight fetish for, I don't know, Excel, Gantt charts, all of those things. They love organisation. So Ali here has identified that in himself or herself that they have it as a preferred role, but how can they hone their skills to be even better? How can they grow to be the best implementer that has ever been? Can they get to that 99th percentile? So only 1% of the population is better than them. And that person is actually in the office, it's Jill, but you know, that's beside the point. So this is what starts to, you know, we start to look at. Now, I'm going to go through some other pages, but the other thing about growth mindset, one key element is asking for feedback. Because actually, if we're in a fixed mindset, we don't want feedback, do we? Because we don't think we can change. We don't think there's point in changing. We are who we are. So why ask for feedback? In Belbin terms, we suggest that you really do ask for feedback. It's a wonderful thing to ask for. Belbin measures behaviour, and because it measures behaviour, it is something that people see, they interact with. Belbin isn't talking about personality, because one would argue that you can comment on your personality because it's something within, isn't it? It's something that what makes you you. But if it's behaviour, if it's Belbin, it's actually how that manifests itself. Because lots of things can change the way that we behave. It's the way that we do things. Your values, your motivations, your current team, your current manager, your current organisation, COVID, all of these things can change the way in which we behave. So what we want is for people to feed back on that. That's really useful stuff. So we at Belbin say, right, find out where you think your strengths are, but then ask for feedback. Find out what they're seeing now, but also to inform your change in the future. Inform where you want to be later on. Okay, so for Ali, people have seen strengths and weaknesses for each of those team roles. Ali's got 6 people observing them, and you can see that they're seeing that big green line there. They are seeing team worker. They're also seeing that that implementer and some completer finisher, but perhaps not as much as Ali sees in themselves. We can see the differences here. What are the strengths other people are seeing? And what are the strengths that Ali's seeing? Why might that be? It could be that Ali's got strengths that had no idea that they were there and that the team appreciated them. Growth mindset, how can I understand that and how can I make them better? Fixed mindset, oh, that's interesting, but I don't know, whatever. I'm not going to change. So it's using this information. I'm not going to go through all the pages because we don't have time. I am just going to go here. So when people observe you, what they do is that they have a list of words, and these words relate to the team roles, and they tick them either once or twice, depending if they are really, you're showing that particular word in excess, and you get to see then how people describe you. How do people see your behaviour? And from a growth mindset, this is brilliant. So you might have some words at the top there you want lower down. It could be you have some words lower down that you want up to the top. I know I do. I have several that I want lower down. I could just accept that and go, that's me. I could just accept that and go, you know, I'm just impatient. Live with it. Or I could say, okay, I know I'm impatient, but what can I do to grow and to understand how that impatience is coming across to others and to be able to adapt my behaviour to be able to ensure that my impatience doesn't get in the way of what needs to be done. So there's lots of ways we can use these reports to help an individual grow, to understand that they are more than just whatever box or label they've put themselves in or somebody else has put them in, to be able to do that. Okay, if we could go back to the slides, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. Because it's not just about you, is it? No, it's about what the team needs as well. Remember at the beginning, we were talking about having an objective, having an aim for our growth. It's not just hard work for hard work's sake. We need to ensure that we're doing things that are required and needed. And this is where the team comes in. Because very few of us work in isolation. I know sometimes we may wish that we work in isolation, but the majority of us work with other people, we work with teams. So it's not just about you growing as an individual in this silo, it's about understanding how the team would like you to contribute. And actually, everybody else within the team should be growing and learning at the same time. A high-performing team isn't one that knows all the answers, but they do know the questions and they do know where in the team potentially they can get those answers from. A high-performing team knows that it isn't high-performing from day one. A high-performing team knows it needs to work at that, and it needs to constantly work, even when it thinks it's ticking all the boxes and getting everything right, because things change. Teams are fluid, they're organic, they're not just always doing the same thing. So it's up to you as an individual to work out what the team needs you to be. I mean, I've got a team circle behind me. You might be able to see that. I doubt if you can. What we use that to find out where the gaps are in the team, where the overlaps are in the team. And in fact, we can use this in addition to what we call one of our team reports. So let's just quickly show the team report, if we may. That would be fantastic. Thank you. I must say, this is wonderful having technical people in the background. Not my normal chaoticness. So we go through the team report. This is putting individual data together, and we can see what contributions should people be making, and where are the gaps. This is based on their top 2 team roles. Where are the gaps? Where do we need to grow and develop? Where do we need to look for other people or potentially other things within each of us to be able to fill those gaps? This next one is interesting. It says, well, you may have all of those people in your team, but who of them is a strong example? Remember the ones who are showing it more than most? This will help you there, pinpoint where that development needs to be. At this point, it could be that nobody has one of those team roles. Nobody has it, but the team desperately needs it. You're at that part of the project cycle where you desperately need a completer finisher. And I have to say, don't we always need a high completer finisher? Perhaps there's nobody there. Well, actually, if somebody's got it in a manageable role, and they know the team needs it, what they can do is something called a team role sacrifice. They're sacrificing the fact that they could play another role a lot better, but it's not needed, and they are going to get themselves into a growth mindset. They're going to understand and learn about the completer finisher, and they're going to play that role with the support of the team. I must say that again, with the support of the team. It is so important that the team is there to back that person up and to be able to have a debrief afterwards. And it could be that person says, don't ever, ever, ever make me play that role again. I didn't know it was in my middling of my roles because I didn't realise just how much I hated it. It could also be that that person's often never had the opportunity to play that. That's fantastic. I want to do more of that. And it becomes real growth for that individual and for that team. So with a high-performing team, really what you're looking at is to support everybody, for everybody to grow and develop, so that you can get everybody, the dark green line here, above the 80th percentile. You want a strong example of type of every team role. Right, let's go back to the presentation. So we talked about when you have a growth mindset, it's about you, and it's also about the team. It's not about us just by ourselves. There needs to be an objective to our growth. The third thing in here is, I call this feeling the fear and doing it anyway. You know, we said right at the very beginning that we are a mixture of a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. What we need to be able to do is acknowledge and understand when we're in that fixed mindset and to be able to do something about it. So it's really getting it to understand that inner dialogue, isn't it? Of, oh, I can't do this, I won't do this, I can't do this, it's not me. So all of that, but I'm going to try, I'm going to see if I can do something, even though I don't want to, it's scary. How do we give an example of this? If you think in the terms of Belbin team roles, okay, so it could be that you're thinking, I'm rubbish at networking. I've got a networking event coming up. I've got to go and I've got to make contacts. I've got to talk to people and I really don't want to. I don't like talking to people. I don't like meeting new people and it's filling me with fear. And so you're going through that mindset, isn't it? I don't do this. You're saying that this is fixed. I'm never going to be able to be good at networking. I'm never going to want to meet people. And if you continue with that fixed mindset, what happens is you don't go, or you sit on the sidelines with your warm white wine. We've all been there. We've all been there. If you were using a growth mindset, the idea would be all of the above. How I've identified the things that I don't feel that I can do, but there must be a way in which I can do them. We would recommend finding something, well, actually, that's very much resource investigator behaviour. I understand that my resource investigator perhaps is low, so I need to find somebody whose resource investigator is quite high. I'm going to talk to them, because you can learn behaviour, can't you? Behaviour can actually be learned. And if you can analyse what it is that you feel that you can't do, look at it in terms of behaviour. Find somebody who has that behaviour in bucket loads and ask them to help you. Ask them to help develop, that mindset that says, actually, I can go. I'm not necessarily going to enjoy it, but I can do it. I am going to go in, I'm going to talk to 3 people, and I am going to ensure that I say X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to get something from that. Then I'm going to treat myself to a 5-minute little bit of a cry in the toilets, and then I'm going to come back again. It's okay. The fact is that you've embraced it. You've felt the fear, you've felt yourself going into a fixed mindset, but actually you've done it anyway. And that's really, really crucial. I think it takes time, though, to really understand when you're in that fixed mindset. I don't think it happens overnight, and I think we have to be quite conscious and also quite kind to ourselves, and sometimes we are going to get it wrong. Remember, we're not always in one or the other, we're constantly oscillating between. Okay, so it's about you as an individual. It's about what the team needs, having that concrete objective, and it's about feeling the fear and doing it anyway. How else can you foster a growth mindset? Well, the other way you can foster a growth mindset is actually by failing. Failure is key to growing. And this starts at the top, actually. This really starts at the top of an organisation, because unless you have a culture of being able to fail, there's not that much hope in the other parts of the organisation. Remember, we were talking before about that culture of genius or culture of development. Well, it's the culture of development is the one that actually usually embraces the ability to fail. Now, I've added something in pure resource investigator style. I added something to my notes here, because last week we were at Learning Live 2023, which is the Institute of Leadership. It was their one-day conference. And I, for once, had the opportunity of sitting in the audience, wow, and listening to all of this wonderful stuff. And they were speaking to, somebody was speaking to us, a chap called Paul Sloan. I don't know if anybody who've heard of him. He's an expert on innovation. And he was really, really talking about organisations needing to allow people to fail. Otherwise, that innovation is stifled. And without that, organisations won't grow. He talked about having budgets for failure, so that actually people felt that they could. It's all right, it's already been budgeted for. We also have that whole concept of psychological safety, don't we? The fact that we need to feel that we know that we can say we've messed up. We know that we can say that something's failed. We're not trying to hide anything. And that doesn't happen overnight either. But the more you foster this kind of organisation and culture, the more likely people are going to have a growth mindset. This is really, really key. He gave this wonderful example, and it's because Wimbledon started yesterday, didn't it? Now, so I'm reading this because it was just so good. Apparently, there is an optimum number of double faults in a game of professional tennis. And that optimum number is not 0. The top tennis players know that they have to keep pushing. They have to keep pushing if they're going to be competitive. But they also know that by keep pushing, is that they will sometimes serve some double faults. And that is the risk that they are prepared to take, because unless they're pushing themselves that bit further to do, to be the best that they possibly can. I've got where I'm going now, but yes, you just need to know that you need to keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, and then double faults are okay. It's okay to fail. In fact, he said they're worried if they don't see any double faults. They don't think the tennis players are pushing it hard enough. I just think that's a great analogy, isn't it? Paul Sloan, go and find him. He'll be on YouTube somewhere. A fabulous speaker, always talking about innovation and failure and being allowed to fail. We need to have not a culture of genius where we think people are the finished product, but that culture of development. There's another element of failure, actually, that we talk about at Belbin. It's about weakness, because we also need to embrace weakness. We need to understand that weakness is the flip side of a strength. And we feel so passionately about the concept of weakness and owning it that we call them allowable weaknesses. Now, if you're accredited or if you've been on one of our courses, you'll understand the concept that we say that if you're going to be good at something, something has to give. They're allowed. Be aware of them, manage them, but don't spend time correcting them, because that time is not very well spent. Find somebody else who has, your weakness as a strength. Pair up with people. Obviously, we hadn't have the non-allowable weaknesses, but yes, that's for another course. That's for people who want to know more. But also own these weaknesses, because you don't know if people are seeing them or not. So ask people for feedback. That list of words we talked about earlier, you can see where your weaknesses are there. Don't worry, mine are quite at the top. I need to get them lower down. So we really need to feel comfortable with weakness, with failure, with all these negative words that we're told that we shouldn't. We really do. Okay, so it's about yourself being the best you possibly can be by not putting yourself in a box, by not saying you are by developing you with an objective in mind. And that objective is, what does the team need you to be? How can you be the most effective when you're working with others? It's about feeling the fear and doing it anyway, understanding when we're going into that fixed growth, that fixed mindset, and being able to turn that around into a growth mindset. And it's about embracing failure. It's about being prepared to fail, being known that failure is the step to actually achieving, it's the step to innovation. And also understanding that we're not perfect and we have weaknesses. We're allowed to have them. We just need to manage them rather than correct them. And last but not least, what's the fifth top tip we have for a growth mindset? It's about working together. It's about training leaders, managers, employees to believe in growth. Because without this belief in human development, it doesn't matter what training courses you put together, they're really going to be of limited success. Having a growth mindset isn't an individual pastime, it's not an individual sport. It needs to be something that is embraced throughout the organisation. It's about sharing ideas, it's about sharing learning, and it's about having those concrete plans, that strategy that allows everybody to do that. Now, there's loads of quotes here to finish on. I didn't know which one to finish on, so I'm going to finish on all of them. So we've got the whole concept, haven't we, that great leaders are made, they're not born. I'd say that great anything are made and not born. And this is how we need to work together so that every single one of you within your organisation, within your team, within your department can be great. I was running through this presentation with my colleague Lisa Ward, who's out today. Actually, she's running a team workshop. And she went, oh, WD-40. And I said, yes, that spray stuff that makes everything work. She said, yes. She said, you need to find the quote. It's brilliant. So I did. Well, actually, I asked her to print it out for me. And I think this sums up this last point brilliantly. It's about working together. Now, WD-40 actually is a great story on innovation, isn't it, and failure, because it's called WD-40 because it was the 40th formulation that actually worked. That meant they had 39 failures before that. But Gary Ridge took over the CEO of WD-40 and he increased its market from 250 million to 44.5 billion. It's all taken from the Harvard Business Review article, by the way, if anybody needs to cite my sources. Why and how did they make that growth? It's an incredible growth, isn't it? I mean, that's what we've got planned for Belbin. We'll be doing billions soon. And it said that they were being driven by a learning-obsessed company culture. One of Richard's favourite ideas is that of the learning moment. A learning moment can be positive or negative and relates to anything that went better or worse than expected. The point is, the outcome is shared with openness and transparency. All staff are expected to admit mistakes and not hide them and share any new learning. Not silo it. We do that here actually at Belbin. If any of us go on a training course or we learn something new, we have to share it with everybody. We actually have a sort of like a 10-minute session every morning where we stand up and we tell everybody what we've been doing. I think we need to change that slightly, but we make sure that the learning doesn't stick with one person. Okay, what is punishable are blame games, cover-ups, refusing to learn from mistakes. This is what they do at WD-40. Transparency is key. And I'll just leave you on this last one here, actually. The most common question you will hear in WD-40 meetings is, what did you learn today? What did you learn today? What have you learned today, and what will you be taking back to the organisation? I know for a fact that we're going to start using that when we all stand up every morning, when we all saying, what are we doing? We're going to start saying, and what have we learned? What is it that we can share? A growth mindset is important. We know it makes a difference to an organisation. We know actually people really embrace the idea of growth. It can make a heck of a lot of difference to an organisation. How do we embrace that? Well, as with all of these things, with all of this, it's not just coming on a webinar and learning and go, yeah, we've got one of those. No, it's about constantly looking at these things. It's about starting as an individual. How can you grow? What about the team? How does the team grow? What is your contribution to that team? Understanding when we might be fitting back into a fixed mindset and just, come on, feeling the fear, doing it anyway. It's about embracing failure. Knowing that failure is part of success, being prepared to use the word weakness. And it's about working together. This isn't about just one of us trying to do this. None of that won't happen. You need to be supported by everybody else within your organisation. We know it can happen. We know it should happen. And there's plenty of stories actually in Carol Dweck's book of organisations that have embraced this, and it has made a difference. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. We need to keep going. This is just the start of that journey. That's Winston Churchill, if anybody's interested. Okay, we've covered quite a lot in the 41 minutes that I have been just talking at you. If you did want to find some more information about those Belbin reports, please use your QR code thingy phone, and you can find out more here, but don't worry, we'll be sending you an email. And if you did have any questions that you would like answered in a meeting with your camera on and your microphone on, again, please do sign up to the live Q&A. But we do have some questions. So before everybody scuttles off and goes back to all that important learning that I'm sure you're now all doing, Tracy, did we have any questions that were coming through?
Yeah, so we've got a couple sort of on the topic of employee engagement and retention. It's very much a challenge at the moment, very much in the news all the time. Does growth mindset have any kind of role in those kinds of challenges?
Oh, growth mindset with engagement and retention. Do you know, that's an interesting one, isn't it? I immediately want to start on another webinar, is that at Belbin we talk about the difference between suitability and eligibility, how sometimes we concentrate too much on the qualifications and the work experience that people have had when we recruit and not so much about their potential, so being how eligible for something or how suitable are they. And when we start recruiting, looking at their suitability, their aptitude to change, their ability to learn, what we do is when people grow within an organisation and develop within an organisation, we've said before, they feel that there's this two-way street and they're more likely to feel engaged, therefore more likely to stay. And the research that Dr. Meredith did many years ago, which is still borne out today, is those people are what we would call your surprise fits, and they stay for a very long time. They may not have everything that you want on paper, they'll have a proportion of it, but what they will do is that learning and growing will make them, my goodness, will make them a really, really important part of your organisation. So yeah, no, I think having that growth mindset within an organisation when also looking at recruitment as well is crucial. Any other questions, Tracy?
Yes. Someone's asking, how can the risks that a growth mindset approach almost seems to encourage us to risk? Is that a requirement almost? How would you manage that in practice, those risks that a growth mindset can create?
How can you manage risk? It's an interesting one, isn't it? How can you manage risk? You can manage risk by creating an environment in which risk is okay, in which risk isn't a dirty word. You can manage risk potentially by having open communication, by having an environment where you feel psychologically safe, where people can put their hands up. it's a difficult one. And again, with all of these things, it's not going to happen overnight, but being aware of this is the first step. And we're all on this journey, aren't we? We're all on a journey of trying to make things better for ourselves, for the teams that we work with, for those that we manage. And there's so much to learn. But having a growth mindset, having the willingness to learn is critical. Speaking to Meredith Belbin, he's 97 and is in the office today. I told him we were talking about a growth mindset, and he reminded me of something that he said again and again. It's never too late to learn, and it is always too soon to stop learning. This is where we need to get to with our growth mindset. It starts with the individual, it goes to the team. You feel the fear, you do it anyway. You embrace those failures, and you work together to do that. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute delight to talk to all of you about a growth mindset. And I will leave you on this. I want all of you to ask your team tomorrow, what have you learned today? Thank you very much.